Hi. Academic integrity. When you think about academic integrity, you might think about plagiarism, cheating, or buying papers online. But the skills that go into building academic integrity are not just avoiding plagiarism, but they work well to build your skills as a researcher, writer, and set a foundation of success for your classes. In fact, the skills that go into maintaining academic integrity also are the skills that strong students will use as they go through their 4 years of college education. In this video, we will look at how to identify and avoid plagiarism, how to build high academic integrity, and how to cite sources. At Corbin University, we're committed to high academic standards, and that means that students use academic integrity and honesty in their papers, presentations, and written work. Academic integrity is another word for honesty in your studies. Academic integrity also comes from personal character and from your relationship with God. As we look at academic work, it's evaluated on the assumption that students have done it by themselves, unless it's a group project with specific instructions to work with other people. And so faculty, staff, and students are responsible to know what academic integrity and plagiarism are. The principles of academic integrity at Corbin are founded on the idea that God is truthful in his character. Truthfulness comes from God's character, that is. And so academic integrity at Corbin is based on this foundation. We should be truthful with one another. We should know that our yes is yes and our no is no, and that we can trust what other people say. So students should represent their own ideas, and if they're using the ideas of others, cite appropriately so that they know, the evaluator knows, that the idea was borrowed from another source. Of course, cultural values around intellectual property are different around the world. And what I have just described is a Western approach to this. Because culturally, international students may come from a background in which using words or ideas from other sources is not considered punishable. According to Nick Dugan, some cultures may consider individual works as shared or communal. And so there are cultural differences around intellectual property. And in your school and in college, you might have been raised in a Western approach where knowledge is individual property, or you might have had your socialization and been raised in a communal approach to intellectual property in which knowledge is shared property. And so neither approach is necessarily wrong or right, but the important thing to know is that at Corbin University there are high expectations for academic honesty, and these are founded on our belief that truthfulness is inherent in the character of God. And so students should present their own ideas or should document the ideas of others. So these values are inherent throughout the American university sort of culture. And so 5 steps to building academic integrity will help to manage this transition, and we believe they also help with being an all-around strong student and researcher. The first of these 5 steps is simply to manage time. When you're facing deadlines, it can be tempting to plagiarize. And so to avoid this stress, carefully plan your weeks and days to give yourself enough time to complete those assignments. So using a planner and just working on the most in a methodical way to complete tasks can help to avoid the stress that comes at the end of a deadline. Because when you're faced with deadlines and don't have enough time, that's when it's tempting to copy paste or plagiarize something. Task management apps can be a great way to help, and some examples of free task management apps are Evernote, Asana, and Microsoft OneNote. You can find any of these online, and most of them integrate with your mobile too. Second is to understand expectations. When a project's too big or too hard, it can be easy to try to take shortcuts or even not know where to begin. So at Corbin, it's always appropriate to ask the professor questions, or perhaps your advisor or tutor if you're not comfortable asking your professor, to avoid feeling the stress that leads to the temptation to plagiarize. Always turn your homework in on time so that you're on a regular schedule and you're not feeling that temptation that comes with last-minute planning. If you're not sure when or where to cite, remember these three things. In the American university system, there's a high consideration and value given to thoroughness and detail, especially when it comes to mechanics and conventions. Now, of course, your professor will look at other things, but the citation style is an important aspect of your paper. Professors have also spent their years researching, and they know how to cite and where to cite, so they can help by providing advice. And finally, even experienced researchers like your professors don't have citation styles or methods memorized. They still have to look their work, check their work, look up citation guidelines, have their work peer-reviewed, and refresh how to do the citation process, because it looks different for every style and every source. The third point is to paraphrase properly. Paraphrasing is where you put someone else's words in your own words. So giving credit always is done with paraphrasing, and it helps you to avoid plagiarism. Importantly, this gives honor to the original author. It's a way of showing that that person has come up with a good idea and that you want to share that idea. One method is to use the author and date, which is an example given here. Use quotation marks if you're copying directly and exactly. And if you're paraphrasing, change the sentence structure and vocabulary. Don't just pick a few words and repeat them. You have to change the whole sentence. Here's a resource for quoting and paraphrasing that I'll include in this email. But it helps you to know when to quote, how to quote, and when to choose between quoting and paraphrasing. So here's a scenario. Esther copies and pastes a sentence from a website and changes a few words in the sentence to make it hers. This is plagiarism because someone else has presented Esther has presented someone else's work to be hers. She should copy the information exactly and then put quotation marks around it, followed by a citation in parentheses. Fourth, don't take shortcuts. There's a parable called The Tortoise and the Hare, in which the tortoise and hare race each other. During the hare takes off at the beginning of the race, leaving the tortoise far behind, but takes a nap during the middle of the race, thinking that he's so far ahead of the tortoise that he can't lose his lead. While he is asleep, the tortoise passes him by and finishes at the finish line, finishing the race first. And so the hare thought that he could take a shortcut and nap during the race, whereas the tortoise was playing the long game and was patient enough to finish the race through hard work. And so it can seem tempting to download or copy material. It may seem the teacher won't notice or that you'll get away with it, but not only is this not learning, it's academically dishonest. So avoid all websites that sell essays or ideas. This can be illegal, in fact. Learn how to use the Corbin University Library and its databases. We'll provide a link to that online as well. And then evaluate the information that you're looking at. Just because a website is online doesn't mean it's true, and especially look for websites that end in .gov or .edu. Those are typically trustworthy because they've been evaluated by an established authority. If you have been researching a lot and don't remember which ideas are yours, for example, you've been looking through lots of websites and books, and you've read a lot of ideas, and you can't remember if you came up with an idea or if it came from somewhere else, you can use one of these sites to check. All three of these check your work for originality, and also BibMe can create citations for you. So here's another scenario. Agus and Benny are doing a paper together, and Agus asks Benny if he can borrow Benny's paper. Is this cheating or not? Is this plagiarism because Agus is now using ideas from Benny's paper in his own paper? So they should first ask the professor if collaboration is allowed. If not, then they should each work on their own paper individually. The fourth step is to cite correctly. So sometimes students don't know what information to cite or the format to use. And so in your discipline, you will probably have one citation style that's used in most cases. For example, in the field of history, it's Chicago, but in most of the other social sciences like psychology, it's APA. That's also used with education. For English, liberal arts, and the humanities, it's often MLA, the Modern Languages Association. So as a major in your field, you should know that which of the citation styles is the one used in your field. This can be found on the Purdue OWL site. Cite the source in the main text of your paper, then cite it again at the end. So you should include not only in the text when you use the idea, but at the very end of the paper when you give your reference list. So as you're researching, always write down the author, title, and publisher so that you can know where an idea came from. Your professor will probably have explicit directions about how to do this, because depending on the class, there may be a different citation style used. The Purdue OWL site has examples of all the major citation styles and gives extensive examples of how to use them. This answers a lot of questions about how to cite things like websites, books, journal articles, podcasts, newspapers, and everything in between. We've looked at 5 steps for building high academic integrity. Remember, this is not just about avoiding plagiarism, but in building high personal character and regard for the work of others, while you show value and honor to the work of others. And remember that your professor won't punish you for oversighting, but you should know how to cite correctly for your area's discipline. If you don't know how to cite, if you don't know where to cite or when, reach out to one of us. We're here to help. And here's my reference list for the source that I used in this presentation.